I dreamt like a war machine, and woke like a child. Lo qua Mayen, Ariel. The Daily Grind, Chapter 158. The girl who'd been with Alana was named Katie. Ragged blonde hair, a razor-thin nose, and a layer of dirt had given way to reveal a series of scrapes and scratches after she'd taken a half hour in the shower. She was, after getting over being timid, honestly kind of a rude person. Older than James had initially assessed, too. She was one of 3 people sitting around a milk crate table with James, who had finally hauled himself out of bed and was now more or less upright. The other 2 were a pair of brothers, probably twins, by the names of Nick and Henry, who couldn't have been older than 12 and had spent a lot of time hiding around corners trying to peek at James like he was some kind of mythical creature. The table, which again was made out of milk crates and a flattened cardboard box, was the only piece of furniture in the room aside from a Joan Jett poster on the wall next to the window that overlooked the backyard, which made for a confusing and barren aesthetic. They were playing cards. "Go fish," Katie told James with an almost petty grin. He didn't do more than raise an eyebrow at the pile of cards she was holding, but didn't say she was cheating. Instead, he made a mistake, opened his mouth, and said, "I don't think that's the game we're playing." "Incorrect rules. Draw a card," she told him, with a wider, snarkier grin. James looked down at his own hand, well out of range of winning, and frowned. "I don't think I like this game," he muttered. "Complaining. Take a card." "Damn it." The entire affair was not helped by the fact that the only deck of cards they had was 2 incomplete sets of playing cards shuffled together, or by the way that new rules got added in secret after every round, and James was never in on the secret. "So how'd you all fall in with Alana anyway?" he asked, trying to make conversation while he puzzled out why the twin to his left had just thrown out 3 cards from his hand in complete silence. If the table had been quiet before, it was silent now. This lasted another couple of plays before the twin James was pretty sure was Nick spoke up. "Our parents left a couple of weeks ago," he whispered. "Then the sheriff told us we had to get out of the house, and Alana found us trying to get to our grandma." "Well, shit. James stopped himself from swearing. "Did your parents... what happened to them?" "They just left," said the older brother, voice on the edge of breaking. "Took everything but not us, and drove off." James winced, then pursed his lips and tried to give as good news as he possibly could. "If it helps, it probably wasn't their fault. The thing that's eating this town is messing with people's heads. If you didn't leave with them, it might just be that you're immune to it, which... I mean, right now that's not good, yeah, but we'll find your parents, get you back where you want to be." "Don't want them," one of the brothers scowled bitterly, hands partially crumpling the cards he was holding. "They're victims too," James said softly. But the kid was, at the end of the day, still a kid. It was hard to understand how something could happen and not be someone's fault when you were young. James still remembered that, pretty vividly. So instead he turned to Katie. "How about you?" "Boyfriend got in a car crash." She shrugged. "We had a lot he was going to build a house on. Some asshole kept trying to get me to sell it since Kent was dead. I kept saying no. Then, a couple of nights ago, someone tried to eat my car, and some nut job came out of nowhere and saved my life. So, I'm here. Got nowhere else to go, right? Not if there's monsters all over the place and the world's ending." "It's not the whole world, to be clear," James told her. "Just this city." He leaned to the side, testing his leg to see if it hurt less yet, hoping his endurance was good enough to keep him going. It didn't, and wasn't. "I need to learn more crab facts," he muttered to himself. "So, you're all just, holed up here until everything blows over?" James asked them. "I guess," Katie said with a shrug, dropping half her hand of cards quietly to the floor in a motion she probably thought James didn't catch. "Sometimes other people come through. Alana goes out for food or other stuff sometimes. We got water and lights. I think this is one of the houses that got bought and is just sitting around, you know?" "I am aware of the cartoon villainy going on around here, yes." James shook his head with a glare. "Do you know roughly where we are? Could you give me directions back to the city center area?" he asked them. "Oh, also take a card for cheating." He pointed at the girl, card game not forgotten entirely while all this was going down. "Why?" one of the kids asked him angrily. "You gonna leave too?" Yes," James nodded. I've got people counting on me, and at least one or two more ill-advised heroics left to do today. The differences between the twins suddenly turned from minor quirks into a huge gulf, as one of them got a kind of excited look on his face, gazing at James like some kind of superhero, and the other one just made a rude noise and loudly proclaimed that was, in his own words, gay. First off, James realized suddenly that he'd been through too much in life to be offended by some shitty child anymore. It's not gay until I link back up with my boyfriend and we start making out. Those are the rules. Second of all, your life getting upended doesn't give you license to be an asshole. He offhandedly turned back to the older member of the group, permanently ignoring the increasing volume of protests from the kid. So, directions? Alana said not to let you leave, Katie told him. Also, take a card for discussing the rules. What? James reeled back. Okay, no, I'm conceding this game, if only to simplify this conversation. Seriously, Alana doesn't get to give me orders. Whatever she remembers or not, I'm fine. I can walk. And I'm not good at sitting around while everyone else is out there getting potentially threatened by whoever tried to kill me. Alana told us not to let you leave, Katie repeated, folding her arms with all the conviction of a student who had been left in charge by the teacher for 5 minutes. James pursed his lips and shook his head at her. Sure, he said with a sigh. All right, well, I'm going to go see if my socks are dry yet. He grinned slightly at the suspicious looks of the people sitting around the makeshift furniture. I won't leave yet, don't worry. Knowing my luck, I'd probably pass everyone one street over anyway. He sighed and stretched, eliciting a satisfying pop from his back as he turned to head to the kitchen, limping slightly. Because this place had been aggressively stripped of furniture, the only place that he had to dry his socks was in the kitchen, unfortunately, in the oven. A process that was mildly anxiety-inducing and also very inefficient, but it was still better than having one sock encrusted with his own blood. And because he'd left the closed-off space of the extra bedroom that they'd been playing cards in, James had an incidentally great view of the front door, which was convenient, because as he braced himself against the wall to stand on one foot and pull on his warm but still damp socks, he got a clear look at the door's deadbolt turning. A deadbolt to a house they were hiding out in, a house none of them had keys for, where Alana had climbed off the back porch to get in and out. James could, it turned out, run really fucking well on a leg that had been speared through by a piece of shrapnel, just so long as he had something to worry about that wasn't the spike of pain. He was already through the door to the bedroom the others were playing cards in by the time the front door had swung open in the hallway, silently shutting the bedroom door and clicking the flimsy internal lock behind himself. His shoes were still in the other room, next to the bed, along with his coat, but there was no time for that now. Where's my gun? He hissed in a silent whisper, striding across the room and sliding open the window as softly as he could, before grabbing the thin metal edges of the screen and popping it out of place. What's... Katie started to say in a normal tone before a sharp hiss and a worried look from James silenced her. The sound of the front door slamming shut brought wide-eyed looks to everyone in the room. What gun? She whispered. Did Alana bring anything from my car? James whispered back, ignoring the heavy boots making echoing thuds across the hardwood floor outside. Multiple footfalls, his brain told him. 3 people, possibly 4. Like any long black plastic cases, maybe? No, Katie was panicking now. Who's... James raised a hand and she went silent, just as the footfalls came to a stop outside the door, and the handle rattled. He'd already motioned the 2 kids up, and they had displayed a healthy level of silence as they approached the window he'd thrown open. James was boosting one of them up, wincing at the scraping noise they were making, when someone tried to kick the door in. The sudden slam of a boot on wood, cracking the aging frame and splintering part of the door, drew a scream out of Katie and a startled jolt from the twin going out the window. The kid twisted and pitched forward, and James had to hope the soft dirt would arrest his fall enough that he didn't get hurt, because he was already trying to get the other brother up, cupping his hands and lifting the kid up to let him climb out smoothly. "We know you're in there," a man's voice came from outside, slightly muffled, and not just from the door. James assumed the guy was wearing a mask, and probably not for pandemic reasons either. "Open the door!" "Hard pass, thanks," James called back, trying to motion Katie over, but the girl had pressed herself into a corner and was frozen in the kind of fear he recognized as being paralyzing when you weren't prepared for a situation like this. "Fuck off, please!" he tried yelling, but his words were drowned out by another heavy kick to the door, wood cracking in protest as the flimsy handle bowed inward from the force. "Give us the kid and you can leave," the voice shouted again, and James recognized it abruptly. He'd spoken to that man, not even 4 hours ago, tried to drag information about the property scam out of him. Because that guy was one of the realtors. "Just hand over the little girl," the property mogul continued. That statement stuck in James's mind. He needed, he knew, more time to break it down, but on the surface of it his immediate reaction was that there was no way they were talking about Katie. As he'd gotten older and breached into his 30s, he had noticed that he mostly referred to anyone under the age of 25 as a kid, but it was kind of a joke, and at no point had he ever considered calling a 20-something woman a little girl. Which meant either these guys were somehow, by impossible coincidence, at the one house they were hiding out in, or they were here for something else. "I am so regret not keeping the power that lets me melt wood," James grumbled, grabbing Katie and hoisting her up to the window, giving silent thanks to JP's procurement of the exercise potions that had allowed him to put on the muscle needed to make this work without just killing himself. "Go," he whispered. "Take the kids, cut left, run. I'll catch up." James did not intend to catch up. He intended to escape, yes, but his main plan was stalling and diverting, leading these assholes on a wild goose chase away from any of their other potential victims. Katie might have recognized that, but as James gave her a push out the window to the tune of another hard kick to the door, she didn't have any complaints. This left James alone in the room, with no one to help him but the moral support of Joan Jett staring down at him from the wall over his shoulder. There was another kick at the door. They were coming in a steady rhythm now. No more demands, just repeated heavy slams and breaking wood. "Hey!" James yelled, and the kicking stopped briefly. "Was Invincible by Joan Jett?" he called through the broken wood. There was a pause, and low voices, and then a woman's voice yelled back, "That was Pat Benatar, you moron!" followed by somebody telling her to shut up. The door to the bedroom at this point had bowed in around the handle, and there was light pouring through the gap. The man's voice that James recognized boomed into the room, from right at where the hole was. He saw an eye peeking in, too, before the light was blocked off by the man's bulk. "Look, buddy, just hand over the kid. You're just here for the money. You don't want to risk your—" James didn't bother rolling his eyes. Instead, he braced his injured leg as best he could, pivoted, and kicked the least splintered part of the broken area of the door. He didn't hit it very hard, but there was a yell of panic and the noise of someone landing on their ass, followed by more yelling. Someone started shouldering into the door again, and the frame cracked, about to give way. James wasted no more time. He turned, used the milk crate as a step to haul himself up to the window frame. Then he paused, waited for a second for the door to burst open behind him, and turned just enough to see who was coming in. He planned to say something snarky. In his head, probably some kind of comment about the song Cherry Bomb, maybe startle them a little bit, give them a show, then drop out the window so they knew who they were following. The three people who stormed in were angry, obviously untrained, and stupid, which was a terrible combination. The one in the back was already shooting with the pistol in his hand. So in addition to deafening his supposed teammates, the dude also had his field of fire blocked off, and the first two bullets just smacked into the wall to James' side. The next one was a bit better, and shattered the glass pane over his head. And by that point, James had decided not to stick around to gloat, pitching himself out the window and rolling across the bark dust of the yard. He realized the scope of his mistake pretty quickly, as the bark dust stuck in his hair, clothes, and especially in his socks, with an evil stabbing feeling. But there was no time for that. James turned and bolted off into the night, hoping darkness would give him a little cover, but not so much that they wouldn't come after him. He got 4 blocks away, weaving back to street side and out of the untended backyards just in case, before an engine rumbled to life in the empty neighborhood behind him. "Shit," James gasped out, putting on all the extra speed he could manage. He could, at least, take a couple corners before they caught up to him. It turned out, while endurance was really bad at healing major wounds, even with his purple orbs helping out, it was exceptional at letting him find the next breath that he needed, helping him make that next pounding footfall as he ran. James had a lot of experience running. He had gone 2 more streets down, up a hill that had left him out of breath but hadn't stopped him, crossed a small park, and had just dived over a low brick retaining wall into a grocery store parking lot when he decided to take a quick break. Endurance had long since kicked in, keeping his muscles from aching, keeping his lungs from burning, or at least keeping those things from stopping him. But as far as James could tell, it wasn't helping him recover any faster. Maybe that was just because James felt pushed pretty far past what he thought was his limit. But then, he had been in a car crash less than 12 hours ago, and the aches and pains from that had only gotten worse, even if they weren't slowing him down quite as much. So James leaned against the wall, took deep, heaving breaths, sitting in the shadow of the parking lot lights, hoping none of the few scattered cars in the parking lot at this late hour had people in them. Then a yellow Hummer whipped into the parking lot, the shiniest, newest car James had seen in this town so far, screeching to a stop in the middle of the orange-lit asphalt desert. The doors flung open, and 3 familiar, masked individuals hopped out, scanning the area, one of them looking down at a glowing orange circle hovering over their outstretched hand. "Oh, fuck me," James groaned to himself. They had found him way too quickly. He couldn't actually run as fast as a car, but he'd been sitting here less than a minute. He'd crossed so many potential side streets and hiding places. It was just statistically unlikely that they had stumbled on where he had crouched for a rest. They're using the maps, James realized with a grunt of exasperation. Of course they were using maps, he thought to himself. They were allied with the dungeon. Why the fuck wouldn't they have a way to track him? It also explained earlier. His brain shakily realized as the trio swept the front of the store, though they didn't go in. They might know he was in the parking lot, but not where. One of them broke off to circle around behind the loading dock, while James stayed unmoving, hoping he'd have a few more seconds of rest. Earlier, when the lead man had yelled at him to give up the girl, made more sense now. They were after Ava, and they obviously couldn't find her because hidden was the perfect counter to being found. So they just went to the next closest person and ended up finding James. Fuck, they probably ended up finding Inesh and Jean, too. James had to get back even faster now, which could be messy. But then he had an idea. A really, really mean idea that left him with a grin a mile wide. This little wall, and the desperate foliage holding on to life here, had a bunch of palm-sized rocks as ground cover around it. James grabbed one, rose up as much as he thought he could without being spotted, and flung the rock with what arm strength he had left against the metal dumpster off on the side of the building. The clang echoed through the early night. From behind the building, James heard one loud shout of alarm, while the 2 standing by the front also turned toward the noise and began jogging toward it. Both of them had guns out now. They weren't hiding anything. No illusions as to what they intended if they actually caught James. And no matter how awesome he thought he was or how stupid they were acting, he had no intention of trying to take on 3 armed idiots with just his fists. Martial arts tricks didn't go that far, and he only had 2 charges of manipulate asphalt left. So he waited for them to hustle by, the bigger man panting and wheezing as he rounded the corner after his smaller counterpart. And the instant they were past the shadowed patch James was crouched in, he rose to his feet and ran. Straight for their car. They'd even left the engine running for him. Apparently, everything James needed to know about evading pursuit he could have successfully learned from stealth video games. His aching feet spiked with pain every time his foot slapped down on the asphalt and drove bark dust chips into his skin, but the upside of only wearing socks was that his steps were muffled. And despite the splinters, he was most of the way to the car before a cry of anger rose up behind him. James almost wasted energy laughing when he heard the guy yell, "Don't shoot my new car!" A bullet slapped the asphalt near him. Somebody wasn't listening. And another one hit the runner on the Hummer. They were aiming for his legs, or they were just bad shots. But then, whatever they were too late. James was in the driver's seat, not bothering to close the 2 open doors on the passenger side. He slammed his own door behind him just in time to catch a pair of bullets, and then threw the car into drive and floored it. He whipped a dizzying U-turn around a parked truck, took out someone's wing mirror, tried to keep his brain from blanking out at the sudden acceleration that caused sparkles of pain across the inside of his eyes, and then swerved out onto the road. He didn't relax. They would catch up, eventually. But right now he had two big advantages. He had their car, and he had a destination in mind that would have backup. He wove his way toward a main road that he sort of recognized, and oriented himself toward Elle's place. Exhaustion held off by little more than willpower, fear, and an upgrade from a sewer lesson that he was becoming increasingly grateful for. Also, a little bit of glib amusement. The fact that he actually got away with this was going to keep James going for a long time. Alana pulled up outside the suburban home and stopped her car with a weary sigh. She needed to get gas again, and was entirely out of cash at this point. She also needed to grapple with the fact that someone had recognized her, and it had changed nothing. She didn't feel any different. There was still that itch in her head, like there were so many things she should be thinking of. And yeah, that feeling had dulled over the last month, but it had come back in force when James was talking to her. But nothing had broken through. Nothing had suddenly revealed itself to her. She was who she had been being. And that wasn't bad, exactly, but she still felt forgotten, as much as she herself forgot, and she couldn't put her finger on why. She was stalling, she knew, running thoughts in loops while she avoided knocking on the door, because someone else who knew her was supposed to be in there, and the last thing she wanted was more of that dread, that feeling in her gut that she wasn't just affected by a condition, but somehow fundamentally broken, in a way that made her permanently disconnected from her old life. Of course, she could only reasonably stall for so long. There were, after all, murderers and monsters out and about tonight. Alana found herself in short order standing on a creaking wooden porch, rapping her knuckles as politely on the worn paint of the door as she could. There was silence from inside for a moment. Mostly silence, anyway. She could hear the distant scraping of a chair on the floor and the soft footsteps of someone intentionally sneaking. She knocked again and heard a voice from the other side of the door in response. "What do you want?" It sounded like a woman only a little older than Alana herself. She stepped back, putting herself in view of the tall windows to either side of the door, and spoke calmly. "Sorry, hope I have the right house here. James sent me to check in with Anesh." The door swung open, revealing a woman who clearly had some qualms keeping the handgun she was holding pointed in Alana's direction, but she did it anyway. Behind her, down a short hall that led to the little kitchen and dining room, a small girl's face peeked out from behind a corner. "James is alive?" Jean asked. "Last time I saw him, yeah," Alana said, her shoulders untensing. She had gotten the right house, then. "Are you Anesh?" Her eyebrows furrowed as she asked. "You don't look... She fumbled for the right adjective. "No, he's not. He went out to meet someone." Jean sagged a bit, the gun lowering. "He isn't back yet." Alana was going to ask if it was okay if she waited outside when Elle's mother rounded the corner. "Oh, for goodness sake," the older woman grumbled, hands on her hips. "If she's not here to kill us, invite the poor girl in. She looks like she has been through a time." Jean shot Alana a sheepish smile, which she returned, motioning the younger woman into the house. Alana nodded politely and stepped inside, kicking off her shoes into the pile by the door. In short order, she was led back to a kitchen table where a pot of cheap coffee was wafting a grim and inviting scent through the room. The girl watched her from over the back of the couch, and Alana glimpsed the flicker of something ghostly around the young girl's head. Alana didn't know how to say this. "Is that..." She shot a nod at the young girl. "Ava, my daughter," Jean said, sitting down stiffly as Elle's mother went to get them another mug. "I'm Jean, by the way. You must be Alana." "Right. Do you know your kid's haunted?" Alana asked directly before her brain caught up. "Do we know each other?" she asked. Jean sighed. "I know. They say it's okay, and she won't give it up, anyway. And we've never met. The guys just talked about you a few times, and Anesh said that his ghost spotted you at the crash site." Oh, they're not ghosts. Elle's mom settled into her own chair. They're maps, though with how my own rebellious daughter described things, I've decided they need a better name. They can't have two strange miracles called maps. That's rude. She turned to Alana. Cream and sugar? She asked with a friendly smile, taking an answer and passing over the coffee before continuing. This is all a lot for an old lady like me to take in, you know. But between the dog walking and this, I don't even need to bother with TV to entertain myself these days. Much better than the status quo, huh? Alana froze, hand gripping her cup so hard she briefly worried it was going to crack. The itch in her head intensified, something in the shroud around her memories breaking away. The what? She whispered, a vision of blood and concrete filling her mind. Oh, it's an old lady word for normal. Jean snorted. You're hardly old, Marjorie, she said into her coffee. And I'm going to be petty and say I'm jealous that you appear to be adapting to this better than I am. It's terrifying. Yeah, Alana whispered. I seem to remember that. The other two women glanced at each other, eyebrows raised. Honey, are you... the older of them started to say before a thin voice cut through the air. It's like fog, Ava said, drawing 3 sets of eyes to the couch she was lurking behind. She says it's like a heavy fog. My memory? Alana asked tiredly. Yeah, I know. It'll move, when there's wind, but it's been sitting for too long. Don't worry, you'll remember. Ava slid back down behind the couch, leaving just the top of her head visible, waiting until attention wasn't on her anymore before she dared to peek again. The word she was passing on from hidden had stung the infomorph a little bit, but not as much as it should have. Maybe it didn't hurt so much after all. Maybe not as much as it would have a week ago, anyway. Still, both of them liked hiding. You've got amnesia? Jean asked. Like what, the real version or the movie version? Movie version, Alana confirmed with a nod. I'm glad someone else recognizes that, honestly. She allowed a soft smile as she stared down at her cup. I tried talking to a couple doctors, one therapist. I thought I was making it up. Ah, magic then, Elle's mother decided. She really had adapted with startling grace to the new reality of her world. Well, excellent news. My daughter and her friends have plenty of that to go around. I'm sure you'll be just fine. She reached over to pat Alana's hand. Alana was going to say something pessimistic and possibly rude, but was interrupted by a thud from the door. Everyone froze, but Alana moved before the others could, snatching Jean's gun off the table and taking up a crouched firing position at the end of the hallway. The door handle rattled, and a young man's voice, tinged with an English accent, came through the thin glass of the windows. Ah, yes, forgot it would be locked. My mistake. Another voice, female but deeper, angrier. Then I shall... No! The first voice echoed. Jean, door please, quickly. A frantic knock came with it. That's Anesh, Jean sighed in relief, darting past Alana, who rose to her feet and calmly added the gun to her own belt. Jean ran to the door and unlocked it, throwing it open to reveal a young man with short black hair and olive skin, along with a stern-faced girl in... Alana did a double take. Plate mail? That was new. The girl was also posed like she had planned to punch the door down, and Alana got the terrifying impression that that would have worked without her even really having to try too hard. Anesh also did a double take, seeing Alana standing there in the hall. Without hesitation, he launched himself forward. Alana barely had time to react before he barreled into her, wrapping his arms around her in a crushing hug. I knew it, he half laughed, half cried. I knew you were okay, and you're here. How? Why? Is there... He trailed off, seeing the confused and awkward look on Alana's face as she looked off to the side, not making eye contact with him or returning the hug at all. What happened? He asked. Movie amnesia, Jean said, closing the door and walking past them. Also, who's your new friend? Oh. Anesh released Alana and stepped back sheepishly. Sorry, this is probably really uncomfortable then. Apologies. This is going to require several explanations. This is Camille. I've been calling her Cam because she annoys me and it annoys her back, and, well... He gave a quick, rapid recap of the night's events from his perspective. The town was cut off, physically and magically. The last line of defense apparently both existed and was kind of an asshole, and they had a rapidly diminishing deadline before people like the girl who had followed him in swept through the city, destroying and killing until whatever anchored the dungeon here was gone. So why is this one following you? Alana asked. Is this some kind of weird honor thing, or is Cam just an idiot? My name is Camille the Violet, the girl spoke for the first time in her rough voice, and you will... Oh, hey, yikes, Alana cut her off. You said that like a title, like it's a rank and not a name. Alana bitterly shook her head. That thing has its hooks deep in you, huh? Damn, that is sad. The armored girl scowled with barely contained fury, fists clenching on empty air with the force of a bulldozer. But before she could respond or retaliate, Elle's mom came through the room. Excuse me, girls, argue later. We have someone you need to talk to. She patted Alana on the arm. Come with me, dear. We'll get you some coffee and some iodine for that cut you have. That does not look very pleasant. With the force of experienced mom-level conviction, Marjorie ushered an unprotesting Camille off to the side bathroom to get the wound Anesh had left on her face looked at. Maybe we shouldn't antagonize the God Thing's kid too much, Anesh sighed at Alana. Why does that sentence sound normal? Alana asked softly. Anesh gave her another apologetic look. I want you to think about that sentence and realize just how weird both our lives were. And are, he said. You talked to James, right? Did you not get any of this from him? Just a persistent sense that all the weird shit is a little too common, and the feeling that he uses humor to hide how afraid he is. Alana summed up James quickly, glossing over all the other emotions that she could read on people as easily as breathing. Clearing his own throat, Anesh gave a small nod. That's almost exactly what you said when we started dating, he told her. Also, if that makes you uncomfortable, I can just not bring it up. Alana blinked at the question. She must have shown some discomfort on her face. I don't know. I feel like I don't know you, but I do. And I can tell how obviously both of you care, so I'm not mad or anything. I just don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here, you know? Anesh nodded. The two of them stood like that for several breaths, neither sure what to say. Eventually, unsure of how to continue, he asked a question that had been fermenting in his brain since he saw her at the door. Out of curiosity, Anesh said, can you take perception from me? What? Alana asked, puzzled. But as soon as the word settled into her ears, she kind of felt it. There was a bridge of some kind between them, a channel over which she could push something indescribable. Push, or, she realized, pull. Alana, almost without thinking of it, drew something from Anesh into herself. He blinked rapidly as his own ability to notice details was cut down, but for Alana it was like the whole world opened up. Suddenly she saw, understood, and internalized a dozen small things all at once. The pattern in the wool blanket over the back of the couch, the brand of cheap coffee they were drinking, the burst fire pattern of dents on Camille's armor, the smell of Anesh's shampoo mixed with cordite, the living stapler watching her silently from the top of a shelf, and more than that, the emotions she could pull from micro-expressions and body language and tone of voice were suddenly amplified to an impossible degree. She could feel, deep in her heart, the mom worry that the older woman in the kitchen felt for Camille. She experienced in real time the awe and fear of a small girl dumped into a world she didn't understand but was still a part of. And she knew in her bones that the stapler was, while unhappy about it, still willing to die protecting anyone in this house. Anesh gently pulled back his viewpoint. The world dimmed back to normal for Alana. But the itch in the back of her head had cracked slightly again. So many small sensations, adding up to the days and weeks she'd lived in her before times, could not be so easily ignored. The fog shifted. A little bit of light shone through for just a second. Alana tilted her gaze up to the stapler on the high shelf. Rufus, she said quietly. Your name is Rufus. Somehow. Not bothering to hide the tears he was blinking away, Anesh smiled at her. Okay, he said. That's good to know. Can we... Alana started to ask him. What she had been planning to ask, she wasn't sure. to do it again, to go talk to the others, to just take some time to process. It had been a long day, a long year. She wasn't sure what she was doing, and maybe what she needed was to sit on the couch and let someone else worry about it for a change. Maybe that's what she could ask Anesh, to just take care of things while she decompressed. She knew, because she remembered a small moment of it, that he would say yes. But whatever she was going to ask was interrupted by a heavy pounding on the front door. "We know you're in there," a man's voice bellowed into the house. "Give us the girl." Anesh, who had jumped when the pounding started, now shared a glance with Alana. She looked back at him and raised her eyebrows. Wordlessly, he unslung the rifle from across his shoulders and shifted into a firing position, while Alana moved, keeping herself out of view of the windows, to crouch in ambush behind the door. From the kitchen, Jean, panicking, and Ava crying out in fear, reached their ears, and then another voice right behind them. "What is this?" Camille said, grim displeasure in her words. Before Anesh could answer, the man pounded on the door again. "Hey, fuckers, hand over the kid and you get to live." "I think," Anesh said, "we found whoever was trying to kidnap Ava last week." "Of course," Camille said bitterly. "And what do you plan to do?" Not let them?" Alana looked back over her shoulder like the armored girl was insane. "What the hell do you think we're gonna do?" Camille hummed, and then Alana was shocked to get a vibe of awkward curiosity off of her. "Do you mind if I—" She waved with one hand toward the door, where someone was now rattling the lock and another was peering in through the side window. While asking, she pointedly did not make eye contact with them. Anesh glanced at Alana, who was as confused as he was. "Sure," he said, not really capable of denying the woman anything anyway. "Oh, leave them alive. We need answers." "Very well," Camille said. She closed her eyes and tilted her head. "Cover the rear. 2 are circling around. Neither are heavily armed." Alana slipped around to the kitchen, and Anesh made to follow, but before he did so, he had to know. Turning to speak over the yelling from outside and the sound of someone hammering against cracking glass, he asked, "Why are you helping?" "I have," Camille said, and he thought she sounded almost wistful, before she hardened her face and her words. "It is not my place to play at being a hero." She idly reached over and picked up a magazine sitting on the side table with a stack of junk mail and began rolling it into a thick tube. "But I think I would like to try, at least this once. Perhaps it will be amusing." Someone reached through the broken window by the front door and tried to scramble for the lock, and Camille lanced forward like a fencer, the rolled-up magazine pinning their arm to the door frame with a wet, splintering crack of a noise that came from the bone and not the undamaged wood beneath it. "Go aid your companion," she ordered Anesh over the shriek of pain from outside. "I will clean up here." She didn't have to tell him twice. Elle had a weird feeling as she drove back to her house. Well, her mom's house, as she had been reminded recently, and frequently. But still. It was a feeling of something going on. Like the sensation you got when there were just a few too many sirens a couple of streets distant. Or, in a more positive way, when it was a holiday and you'd forgotten and all the streets were empty of people who were spending time with family. Right now it was kind of a mix of those two exact things. There weren't any other cars out, really. The occasional single vehicle passing by in an oncoming lane, and a couple of times an intersection she had to stop at while a lone car made a left turn, but that was it. There weren't any pedestrians either, but that was less uncommon for this hour of the night anyway. This wasn't a college town, wasn't a place that had anything to attract young people to move to it. It was a city that was a little too far off the big route, rolling along mostly out of momentum and a couple big factories. Dying, slowly, as everyone who wanted something better left. Basically, it wasn't the kind of place where there was much going on to get people out of their houses at late night. Elle's feeling of unease solidified when she tried to go through a Taco Bell drive-thru on her way home and found the primary employer of persons under the age of 20 in the city was closed. Lights off, doors locked, nothing going on inside. Her feeling got worse when she passed by what looked like a crash site. Two cars that had clearly impacted each other, but there was no sign of flashing lights or any human reaction at all, not even a road flare. In a way, the creeping sense of dread was reassuring, because Elle had been worried about nothing for weeks, and now, being worried about something was kind of a nice change of pace. In another way, it was terrifying, because it was a sudden shift from a feeling that something was off to evidence that something was actively going wrong, right now. And there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. What was she supposed to do? Kill the dungeon? She couldn't even fight the dungeon. If James and Anesh, the literal professionals, hadn't figured out how to do something to a dungeon, what was Elle supposed to do about it? She didn't know why people were vanishing, why it was so quiet, or why apparently the police and fire departments had decided to take the night off. Elle had two tools to deal with this sort of thing. One was her car, and the answer there was running away, and the other was her spell that traced a path forward, which was awesome and kept her alive, and she just didn't have the velocity for it, and it didn't help anyone else anyway unless she took drastic measures. Running away didn't help anyone else either, though. So she'd been poking around, talking to some old friends and acquaintances and enemies, trying to find any hint, however thin, that she could pass on to the actual heroes, and she had turned up pretty much nothing. Now, full of nervous fear, she drove home and tried to think of how to convince her mom to run away from this entire state with her. Then she turned the corner down the street her mom lived on, and the panic intensified to a sharp peak. There were cars around her childhood house, several of them parked in a way that walled off the street and clearly showed they were not here for a polite visit. Even as Elle approached, gut clenching as she found she had no other plan other than to run in, another vehicle barreled down the road from the other direction, coming to a jerking halt in front of her home just as Elle pulled up more smoothly on the side of the sidewalk. Her relief when James jumped out of the massive bright yellow truck thing was like water in the desert, though the pained stumble he gave, and the lack of any resources beyond a torn shirt and lack of shoes, reignited a new fear in her chest. Elle got out of her own car, pulling the shotgun she kept under the passenger seat with her. She didn't have a secondary for James, but she could at least back him up. "What's going on?" she called to him. "Someone tried to kill me. Guess they got here first." His voice was dire and betrayed just as much fear as she was feeling. "I'll go first. Watch my back." He said it simply, like he trusted her, and Elle felt a burst of angry indignation that was quickly overwhelmed by a tight feeling in her chest that she didn't really know how to place. James, however, did not wait for her to deal with her emotions. He just stalked low across the lawn, only taking a second to try to brush something off one of his socks in the dry grass. Elle followed, gun up, but pointed off to the side as the two of them moved on the door. One of the windows that she used to press her nose into as a kid was broken. To the side, the rhododendron her mom insisted on trying to keep alive had been crushed into the ground. The door that she'd gone through thousands of times lay open, inviting them into a house that still had the lights on. James had described to her once the aura of fear that the attic dungeon they found used to put off. How it left someone feeling like the last thing in the world they wanted to do was walk up those steps. Right now, Elle didn't need a dungeon to get that effect. They swept into the house together, James checking corners and Elle coming in behind him, ready to kill anyone that had hurt the people who were supposed to be safe here. And then a voice from the kitchen froze both of them, before James nodded and crept forward. Both of them cleared the hallway at the same time. James tensed up mid-step, Elle froze her finger on the trigger, and then, taking in the scene in front of them, they let the anxiety bleed out of their hands and shoulders. "Oh hey, you're back," Anesh said, finishing up a heavy double knot on the rope he was tying around an unfamiliar person's hands. "Sorry about the mess. We had a thing." 6 humans, all of them restrained in some way, were lined up on the carpet around the room's fireplace. One of them was glaring at James, but the rest were either unconscious or had a terrified look in their eyes. A pile of stuff sat on the kitchen table next to a cold pot of coffee. A stack of guns, knives, handcuffs, a police badge, all of it watched over by a grumpy-looking Rufus. "Where's my mom?" Elle asked instantly. "Upstairs. She's helping the new girl with something. Jean and Ava are fine too, just taking a nap in your bed. Sorry about that. There wasn't much space." Elle had already bolted up the stairs, and Inesh just finished the sentence with a kind of incredulous shrug fired after her retreating form. Then Inesh met James's eyes. "We've got a big problem," he said. "Bigger than these idiots, anyway," Alana added, lurking in the back corner with her arms crossed like a menacing statue. "Yes, though these idiots are part of it," Inesh countered. "Allegedly." "Allegedly, yes," he rolled his eyes. "Also, good to see you up. You doing okay?" Inesh asked James, who was watching the two of them with a goofy grin on his face. James just kept smiling. "I'm doing great," he said, settling into a chair and high-fiving Rufus. And then, after a wince of pain, he added, "But I would like some ibuprofen. And shoes. And my gun." He directed a look at their bruised captives. "And then, after that," James let his voice get serious, "I think I would like some answers."